The moment I stepped into the gilded cage, I knew the casual brunch was a lie. The air in the private dining room was suffocating, heavy with the scent of overpriced lilies and betrayal. My mother, Holly, sat at the head of the table, flanked by my stepfather, Richard, and a man in a pinstripe suit I had never met. There were no menus. There was only a thick legal document in the center of the table, waiting like a loaded weapon. The lawyer didn't waste time. He slid the contract toward me and said my mother just wanted what was fair. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes, and started counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My mother frowned, confused. That's when I smiled for the first time that day. "You're a lot of people," I said, my voice steady. Funny thing is, I only brought one person too. I knew in that moment I had two choices. Sign my life away, or burn their fantasy to the ground. Before I tell you who walked through that door next, drop a comment and tell me, what's the one thing you've forgiven your family for, that you know you shouldn't have? The private room in the gilded cage was designed to make you feel small. The walls were lined with antiqued mirrors, reflecting my mother's vanity back at her from a dozen different angles. Everywhere I looked, I saw Holly adjusting her silk scarf, checking her reflection, making sure her grief looked photogenic enough for the occasion. My stepfather, Richard, sat next to her, tapping a gold watch that cost more than my first car. He looked bored, like he was waiting for a slow waiter to bring the check. Except the check in this scenario was my entire future. I took a sip of water and let the silence stretch. I am Taylor, 31 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have worked as a forensic accountant. My job is to find the things people desperately try to hide: illicit assets, buried debts, the little mathematical lies that destroy empires. But to the people in this room, I wasn't a professional. I was just Taylor, the difficult daughter, the spare, the one who hadn't followed the script. "Taylor, darling," Holly said, breaking the silence with a voice that dripped with synthetic sweetness. "We aren't trying to fight. We're just trying to be logical. Look at your life. You're single. You have no children. Your career is intense." She gestured vaguely at my blazer as if earning my own living was a character flaw. "What do you need a lake house for? To fill it with cats? Richard and I have a social standing to maintain. We have a family to support. It's simply a waste for a property of that magnitude to sit empty with you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel the familiar sting of inadequacy. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. I remembered my father's funeral 3 months ago. It had been raining, a miserable, gray downpour. While I was standing over the open grave, holding the cremation urn, and trying to breathe through the crushing weight of loss, Holly had leaned over to me. I thought she was going to offer comfort. Instead, she whispered that the humidity was going to ruin her blowout and asked if I had remembered to bring the checkbook for the caterer. They broke me that day. But they didn't know that while they were worrying about their hair, I was filing the paperwork to become the executor of the estate. Listening to her now, watching her frame her greed as concern, I finally understood the mechanism at work. It wasn't just selfishness. It was a trap. The trap of normalizing cruelty. For my entire life, Holly had treated her emotional abuse like a family tradition. She wasn't just asking for the money because she wanted it. She was demanding it because she believed she was entitled to harvest my resources. In her mind, my independence wasn't an achievement. It was an insult to her control. She wasn't angry that I had the house. She was offended that I wasn't broken enough to hand it over. She expected the old Taylor, the one who craved approval, the one who would apologize for taking up space. She didn't realize that version of me had been buried along with my father. "I don't need the house, Mother," I said, my voice flat and unbothered. "I own the house. There is a difference." Richard slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "Don't get smart with us, Taylor. Your father wasn't in his right mind when he signed that will. He was sick. You manipulated him. We can tie this up in court for years. We can drain every penny you have in legal fees until you're begging us to take a deal." The lawyer pushed the contract closer to me. "It's a generous offer, Taylor. 60-40 split. You keep the cash, they get the real estate. Everyone walks away happy." I looked at the pen. I looked at my mother's expectant face. She thought she had won. She thought I was cornered, alone, and outgunned. She had no idea that I had spent the last 3 weeks doing exactly what I do best, following the money. "You're right," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This could get very ugly in court. Which is why I didn't come to negotiate." I glanced at the door just as the handle turned. "I came to audit." The lawyer cleared his throat, a wet, nervous sound that cut through the tension. He tapped a manicured fingernail on the document in front of me. "The Fairness Agreement," he called it. I glanced at the text upside down. It was a masterpiece of legal fiction. It demanded the immediate liquidation of my father's entire estate. Stocks, bonds, the condo, and the lake house to be pooled into a trust managed, unsurprisingly, by Richard. They were offering me a 40% stake in my own inheritance, generous enough to keep me quiet, small enough to keep me under their thumb. "Just sign it, Taylor," Richard growled, leaning forward until I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Stop trying to be the victim. You think you're special because your dad left you a few accounts? You're nothing without this family. You sign this, or I promise you, by the time we're done with the legal fees, you won't have enough left to buy a bus ticket out of here." My mother sighed. A tragic, practiced sound. "He's just upset, Taylor. We all are. We're grieving. Can't you see this is tearing us apart? Just do the right thing for once." I looked at them. Really looked at them. For years, I had seen them as giants, powerful, judgmental figures who held the keys to my self-worth. Now, under the harsh lights of the private dining room, they looked small. Richard was sweating, a bead of perspiration tracing a line down his temple. Holly's hands were trembling slightly as she smoothed the tablecloth. They weren't grieving. They were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. "I didn't read the contract," I said softly. The lawyer blinked. "Excuse me? I didn't read it because it's irrelevant." I reached into my bag, not for a pen, but for my phone. I tapped the screen once. "And I think you're sitting in someone's chair." The door to the private room swung open. It wasn't a waiter. It was Catherine. If you have never met a high-stakes litigation attorney, let me paint a picture. Catherine didn't walk into a room. She occupied it. She was wearing a suit that cost more than Richard's car, and she carried a leather portfolio like a shield. She didn't smile. She didn't introduce herself. She simply walked to the empty side of the table, pulled out the fifth chair, and sat down. The silence was absolute. "Who is this?" Richard demanded, half rising from his seat. "This is a private family meeting. Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Catherine said. Her voice was low, calm, and terrifying. She didn't look at him. She was busy arranging her files on the table with surgical precision. "My name is Catherine Vance. I am representing Taylor in her capacity as the executor of the estate. And before you say another word about fairness or family, you should know that at 9 this morning, we filed a motion for a full forensic accounting of all assets connected to the estate." Holly laughed, a nervous, high-pitched titter. "Forensic accounting? For what? It's a simple inheritance." "It was," I said, finally meeting my mother's eyes, until I started looking at where Richard's money was actually going. Catherine opened the portfolio. She didn't slide a contract across the table. She slid a single, glossy photograph. It wasn't of a house or a bank statement. It was a picture of Richard, red-faced and shouting, standing outside a very specific, very illegal betting parlor, 3 towns over. "We aren't here to negotiate the will, Holly," I said, my voice cold. "We're here to talk about the $300,000 of debt Richard tried to hide in the estate's liabilities." Richard's face drained of color. He looked at the photo, then at me, and for the first time, the aggression vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. "I told you," I whispered. "I came to audit." Catherine didn't stop with the photograph. She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a binder, thick and black, about 2 inches of solid paper. She didn't hand it to them. She simply dropped it in the center of the table. It landed with a heavy, flat thud that made the water glasses jump. "That," Catherine said, her voice devoid of inflection, "is the forensic summary of Richard's financial activities over the last 24 months. Would you like me to walk you through the highlights? Or shall we skip straight to the second mortgage he took out on your primary residence without your signature?" Holly's head snapped toward her husband. "What?" Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish on a dock, gasping, drowning in the sudden influx of truth. "It's not just a mortgage, Holly," I said, leaning forward. "It's 6 maxed-out credit cards. It's a line of credit against his business that hasn't seen a profit in 3 years. It's online poker accounts registered under fake names. And it's a terrifying amount of money owed to people who don't send late notices in the mail. They send guys with tire irons." I watched the realization wash over my mother. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something far more visceral. Humiliation. She looked at the mirrors surrounding us, seeing her reflection fracture. For years, she had curated this image of high society perfection, of the wealthy power couple engaging in philanthropy and leisure. Now, in seconds, that image was being stripped away to reveal the rot underneath. She grabbed the binder, her manicured nails clawing at the plastic cover. She flipped it open. Rows of numbers, highlighted in yellow, stared back at her. Withdrawals. Transfers. Losses. "You lied to me," she hissed at Richard. You said the business was expanding. You said we needed Taylor's money for investment capital. I did it for us, Richard pleaded, his voice cracking, losing all its previous bluster. I was going to win it back. I just needed a bridge loan. Taylor's inheritance was supposed to be the bridge. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that felt like breaking glass. A bridge? No, Richard. My father's life savings wasn't a bridge. It was a bucket of water you were going to throw on a grease fire. I looked at the lawyer, the man in the pinstripe suit who had been so arrogant 5 minutes ago. He was hurriedly packing his laptop, closing his notebook. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one, and he clearly had no intention of going down with the captain. This meeting is over, the lawyer mumbled, not making eye contact. I was retained to draft a family settlement, not to be a party to fraud. Wait! Holly shrieked, grabbing his sleeve. You can't leave. We have to fix this. You can't fix it, Mom, I said. I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. You can't fix a black hole. You tried to ambush me today, because you thought I was the villain. You thought I was the selfish daughter holding out on the family, but I'm not the villain. I'm the only person in this room who actually knows how to count. I looked down at them one last time. Richard, slumped and gray-faced, terrified of the debt collectors waiting in his future. Holly, frantic and furious, not because her husband was an addict, but because her lifestyle was about to be repossessed. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single, crisp $100 bill. I dropped it onto the white tablecloth, right on top of the unsigned fairness agreement. For the water, I said. And for the show. I turned my back on them and walked toward the door. Catherine followed close behind. Meeting adjourned, I whispered. We made it exactly 40 feet. Catherine and I walked out of the restaurant's heavy oak doors and into the parking lot. The air was cool, but I didn't have time to register it. I unlocked my sedan, threw my purse into the passenger seat, and reached for the door handle. Screech. The sound was metal on asphalt, a high-pitched mechanical scream. A massive black SUV roared around the corner of the lot, jumping the curb and slamming on its brakes inches from my rear bumper. It was Richard. He had circled around back before we even paid the check. He wasn't blocking the exit. He was blocking me. Before I could lock my door, Richard was out. He didn't look like a country club member anymore. His face was a mottled purple, veins bulging in his neck, his tie loose and crooked. In his right hand, he gripped a tire iron. Smash. My driver's side mirror exploded. Shards of glass sprayed across the asphalt, glittering near my boots. You think you can just walk away? Richard screamed, raising the tire iron at my windshield. Spit flew as he ranted about humiliation, money, and fixing what I'd ruined. I froze. This was no longer legal. It was a desperate man with a weapon inches from my face. Catherine stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, put that down. Shut up, Richard roared, swinging the iron toward her. This is family business. Holly rushed in behind him, crying theatrically. Not to stop him, but to use his violence as leverage. She begged me to give them the money, warning that Richard would be killed if I didn't, accusing me of being selfish. I looked at them, Richard spiraling, Holly exploiting his breakdown, and something inside me snapped. I was done. Fine, I said, hands raised. You win. Richard lowered the iron. I told Catherine to draft the transfer. Give them the Finger Lakes Lake House and get me out of there. Holly gasped. The estate was worth $2 million, the symbol of everything they wanted. Catherine calmly produced her tablet. Standard quitclaim deed. Transfers the Finger Lakes property to Holly Sterling. Effective immediately. Richard barely skimmed it. He saw the address and stopped reading. Holly's hysteria vanished, replaced by hunger. My house, she whispered. I signed. Taylor Vance, executor. Richard laughed, tossed the tire iron into his trunk, and hugged Holly. They drove off celebrating, already planning parties. Only after they were gone did I breathe. Did they read Section 4, Paragraph B? I asked. Catherine smiled. No. They never do. 3 weeks later, the deed was officially recorded. Richard immediately tried to sell the house. He couldn't. What they didn't read was that it wasn't a fee simple deed, it was a life estate. I didn't give them ownership. I gave them the right to live there. They can't sell it. They can't mortgage it. They can't use it for cash. Worse, under New York law, the life tenants, my mother and Richard, are responsible for all costs. Taxes, insurance, maintenance, $45,000 a year in property taxes, an $80,000 roof repair before winter. They wanted status, not security. So I gave them the stage and made them pay for it. I kept the $1.8 million in liquid inheritance, safe and untouched. They thought they took my legacy. Instead, they locked themselves in a gilded cage. Months later, Holly posted photos on Instagram, posing as an old money matriarch at the lake house. Champagne, parties, captions about legacy. They didn't post the tax bill or the leaking roof. I updated the county records, directing all future tax invoices to them. It was a small click, but it closed the door for good. They got the view. I got the freedom.